The voice of sharing during ASEAN.
Hey, this is Arlene and we are back.
Good morning, this is Gowri and you are listening to ASEAN.com.
And today we are going to start our discussion by not to discuss yet on news, but to make sure that they will just to have a light chat about what's happening today. You know, today there's a big hoo-ha on the UPSR thingy.
I read about the science paper being leaked, and they have been making a lot of comments about that, saying that it's not much of a surprise happening in this country because it has happened a number of times in the past, not only UPSR, even with PMR, with SPM. It seems to be an unusual occurrence.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. It seems like we will have a lot. I just hope that they will repeal the examination. Not just the Sedition Act, but also any form
of UPSR as well.
Any form of examination.
So should we go and stage a protest? Gather a huge amount of people.
Yeah, we should persuade parents.
Yeah.
Although we are not parents yet, but yeah, we should persuade
parents. Well, you
will
be one soon enough.
We should persuade parents like, hey, let your kids play, not to study all the time. So we will have our news for today, and we will have it in a bit after this jingle.
ASEAN Breakfast Call. First and foremost news from Southeast Asia.
Hey, we are back again, and today we will going to start our news with Azmi Sharom. Gowri, why Azmi Sharom is in the news again?
He is in the news. He has been in the news for the past couple of weeks because he was charged under the Sedition Act for just making a political observation. He is a law professor in and he is also a columnist with The Star. And apparently this one article he wrote was considered to be seditious, and therefore he was taken in by the police. And the students in were of course not happy, especially the law students, because studying law, especially under Azmi, they really knew their rights. They knew the law of the country. They knew how things worked, especially in terms of human rights, in terms of arresting a person. And they were not happy about it, and they decided to stage. I wouldn't call it a protest. It's more of taking a stand, really. And there was a statement released by our favorite minister, Khairi Jamaluddin, who advised students against going for the protest. He said, don't cancel your class. Please go to your classes. Don't go for the protest. Don't just do it for Azmi, just for some guy. Don't ruin your education. But it's much, much more than that. When students attended the protest yesterday, it wasn't because of Azmi per se. It wasn't just for him. It was for the sake of academic freedom. Mm-hmm. Because as an academician, you do a lot of research, you write a lot of papers, you make observations. That's your job. And if you put into jail for that kind of jeopardizes everyone else. In terms of research, in terms of what you write, it curbs the freedom in that way. And another reason was also human rights, where someone makes a statement and with the Sedition Act, they don't care about your intent. It doesn't matter what was the reason that you wrote that. As long as they find it seditious, you're taken in.
That's definitely the case. And just to give a bit of hint up that besides Azmi Sharon, there were a slew of academicians, journalists, as well as activists that being caught. And another one that was being caught and being charged under the Sedition Act is also, interestingly, an ulama.
Yes, and he was taken in because of a statement he made saying that going against the Sultan is not supposed to be seditious, and that was seditious.
This is really, maybe I'm being a bit biased because I'm actually a friend of the person, Wan Ji. But at the same time, I just feel that how can someone who is only talking on a viewpoint of religion would be seditious when he's not really challenging in a way the government, but more on challenging the question of how legitimate certain things within the religious context.
And we have been dissecting the Sedition Act for a few days. We had a few different speakers, and based on what they told us, it seems that the intent is really not taken into consideration. Whatever you write, whatever you say, if it's considered seditious, then then you're just taken in. And of course, that you can appeal for it. Like in the case of Asmi Sharom, everyone's appealing to the AG to review the case, to review the charges against him. But at the end of the day, it's up to them to decide, which is why everyone is calling for the repeal of the Sedition Act, because it's not healthy for a democratic country where freedom of expression is supposed to be encouraged.
Even if the government or the authority want to maintain this constitutional monarchy, but at the same time, you cannot be at a state where you can't even question anything at all. Even when, I have to give example of other successful constitutional monarchy, like those in Scandinavian countries and also in UK, for example. They are similar to Malaysia in a way that they still uphold the monarchy as part of the state, but at the same time they know the limits of the monarchy, and they know that in order to protect freedom of expression, you cannot have people not talking about the monarchy, and a healthy debate about certain aspect of the state is supposed to be fine. You shouldn't curb the whole discussion at all just because you fear that people would go to the extreme. A healthy discussion will encourage people to think beyond just about whether we should have the monarchy or not, but whether what form of governance that we want, and how the monarchy can be included in the whole system without being seen as jeopardizing the whole democracy of this country.
And it also suppresses intellectuality in the country, because when people try to get together, they try to analyze what's going on with the country, and they come up with their analysis, their conclusion, and then that is seen as seditious. So where is the country heading if all these intellectuals, all these academicians actually cannot present their research, cannot tell people what they're thinking about? Because in the case of Asmi, he was just a columnist and he's a lecturer. And as a columnist, you're allowed to give your opinion. And even
as a law professor, you are allowed to give your law opinion, especially when it comes to in his comment when it comes to Selangor's governance, when he was referring it to the Perak crisis. It doesn't mean that he was undermining the Perak the decision making on the Perak crisis, the Perak itself in 2009, but at the same time, you cannot just let people not giving references when it is part of his job to analyze it and give a more historical in-depth about how the way forward should be. And regarding about Wan Hussein, which is the ulama, which is the he's a Islamic Muslim preacher, and he was being caught yesterday at his place at 2:00 in the morning, and he was being caught at his place at 2:00 in the morning. And what is saddening is he's an outspoken preacher, unlike other Muslim preacher. He's not afraid of discussing matters that are sensitive, especially among Muslim in Malaysia. There are certain topics that is a no-go topic, and the best example is the monarchy. That is why it is important to look at the bigger picture. Like, should we curb a discussion just because for the fear that it would change the mindset of certain people, or we want a healthy debate on matters where it would change the mindset of people, but at the same time, it would expand, the understanding on what is the future direction of Malaysia.
But he probably made sense, because if you go back to our Rukun Negara, the first thing says kepercayaan kepada Tuhan, and he said, God comes before Sultan, and that is in accordance to what we believe in and how we run the country. So why would that be seditious in the first place?
That's true. And in fact, if you want to catch an Islamic preacher who mentioned like God comes before Sultan, you actually, I mean, I don't.
You are going against the Rukun Negara in a way.
Yeah, that's true. In a way,
you are being seditious, not him.
That's an interesting point. It's interesting that you raised it out. You raised this out. Besides the tension that we have in Malaysia right now on the Sedition Act, a larger tension is brewing between Vietnam and China, as well as I mean, we have discussed this quite several times since April on how the Chinese has been quite tough against Vietnam and also the Philippines. But this time against Vietnam, it is even more. It's even more tense, even though there were many attempts by even U.S. intervention in terms of trying to ease the tension as well as create the way forward to solve the issue.
And
but
this recent tension just happened yesterday on Wednesday, where crew members of the Chinese boats were caught harassing fishing vessels and beating Vietnamese fishermen near the contested Paracel Islands in the South China Sea. And this is something new from the Chinese. I mean, apart from intimidating the Vietnamese with their warships and all, now of course, this is an alleged statement, but it seems that the Chinese are now starting to beat up the Vietnamese fishermen.
It seems so. And when it comes to the Vietnamese, the tension is really high. I mean, partly because of what is happening within the South China Sea, also partly because until now, there are virtually very little dialogue happening between both countries on how to solve the issue. A lot of the reactions are very negative. Like, for example, the riot in Vietnam, which left at least 3 Chinese nationals dead and hundreds of foreign-owned factories damaged. And also the action of the Chinese from China to drill rigs there and in areas that are contested without even getting the permission of anyone.
And so far, the Chinese Foreign Ministry has not responded to this comment or to this incident, and it also says that the Chinese president is attempting to play down the tension between the two nations, saying that it's not really that serious as the newspapers are making it seem. It's really not that much of an issue, that we're still friends. But, well, yeah, of course they are still friends for now, but if this keeps happening, they may not be on such friendly terms anymore, and it could pan out to be something a lot more harmful to the entire region.
The thing is, the area within South China Sea is not just a tension between Vietnam and China, but it is a tension between ASEAN countries, China, and interestingly, even Taiwan is part of this tension. And a lot of people do not understand that the tension will cost a lot in terms of the diplomatic relationship between ASEAN and China, especially when there is a discussion underway, a free trade discussion. It's called the RCEP, where China will be leading the way on the free trade discussion. It could be the biggest, the largest free trade bloc, larger than the TPPA. In fact, it could be even larger than the TPPA. And the RCEP is called Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, while TPP is called Trans-Pacific Partnership. And the countries involved in the RCEP will involve ASEAN, China, India, Japan, and a few other prominent countries. And this is why it is important to maintain the diplomatic relations between all countries, including Vietnam.
And we definitely don't want any outside power intervening into this matter, because it's an ASEAN issue, and we are trying our best to have our dialogue, have a more diplomatic solution to it. Like, Indonesia has already stepped up and has agreed to be the mediator, and most of the countries are willing to help, but in the end, it has to come down to Vietnam and China to make the decision.
The political will of both countries is important. Talking about free trade, Do you know which country is investing in Myanmar right now?
Yes, I do.
Apparently, our own Vietnam, which I mean, we had a discussion earlier on Vietnam. Vietnam is eyeing to invest in Myanmar, and they might be potentially the top 3 investors in Myanmar.
And the Association of Vietnamese Investors in Myanmar, or short for AVIM, sets to raise their
It's not AVIM, right?
oh no, they are raising their cumulative investment in Myanmar to 1.5 billion US dollars by 2015, and like you said, placing Vietnam among the country's 5 largest foreign investors.
Mm-hmm. The Daily, which is a member of the ASEAN News Network, reported that AVIM chairman Trans Bach Ha unveiled the goal at meeting in Hanoi on September 7 with speakers of the Assembly of the Union of Myanmar, Thurayu Sueman, who was on an official visit from September 5th. Based on the invitation of the National Assembly Chairman Nguyen Sin Hung, business would work to help raise the two-way trade between two countries to 650 to 700 million US dollars, and the number of Vietnamese tourists to Myanmar will increase to 35,000. That's a very positive progress between both countries.
Mm-hmm. And the association also voiced hope that Myanmar would accelerate the licensing processes for Vietnamese projects, and Vietnam companies will be dabbling in various fields such as textiles, agriculture, healthcare, energy, construction, material production, as well as finance and banking.
Mm-hmm. Besides that, do you know that Myanmar and Vietnam share many similarities in geography, economy, and culture that could be advantageous for promoting trade links and investment between both? Even though one is a communist country, another one is still somehow a transition from a military to a more democratic system. But at the same time, geographically and in terms of the food, in terms of the people, they are somehow quite similar.
Yes, they are, and also it seems that they are trying to focus more on agriculture, tourism, finance, and banking sectors, which will be the most effective way to bridge the gap between the two countries.
Whenever we talk about ASEAN, we always think about the top 4 countries: Malaysia, Singapore, the Philippines, and Indonesia. But we fail to see that, and also another one, Thailand, the top 5. But we fail to see that they are, other emerging economies within Southeast Asia, and this would include Myanmar and Vietnam. Vietnam has since opened up since the early 90s until now, and they have achieved a tremendous leap forward, especially being friends with their once foe, the US. And for Myanmar as well, now they are trying to reach out to all the superpowers from China to the US to India, and this is important, and also of course Japan and Korea. And this is important to see that the dynamics of power in ASEAN will change, especially if you want to achieve the ASEAN economic community in 2013 or 2020 or 2030?
2020.
In 2020. We have to realize that in 2020, the dynamics would be much more different than now. Perhaps countries like the countries within the Mekong River would achieve much more integration and prosperity than us. Who knows? And a lot of things could happen.
And hopefully this creates more job opportunities in Myanmar, and the poor people can stop coming to Malaysia and slaving themselves away over here.
Well, that's another topic that we have to discuss. Talking about talking about employment and job opportunities and all that. Unfortunately, when it comes to market and investment, Malaysia is not performing that well, especially our KLCI.
The FTSE Bursa Malaysia KL Composite Index, which is the worst performing market in the ASEAN region in the year-to-date period, may eventually play catch-up with its peers should the country's fundamentals remain intact.
And it seems like this was spoken by the UOB SS Management Sdn Bhd CIO, Chief Investment Officer Francis Ng. that this was possible, but noted that stock picking was key as the benchmark index was already near the consensus target level. In the YTD period, the performance of the FBM KLCI has been quite flat, only 2.46% increase. But if you pick the right stocks, you can actually generate the right returns over the above how the index performed. This was being spoken by Francis Ng. So it seems like Malaysia need a bit of picking up.
But this shouldn't scare anyone because KLCI is actually the Kuala Lumpur Composite Index, but we have a bigger structure, which is the KL Stock Exchange. So KLCI is only a component of the KLSE. So just because KLCI is doing badly, doesn't mean that the entire country is actually doing pretty bad. It's just one component. So we're probably still on the right track, except just one minor component, which is KLCI.
But to performing worse than other ASEAN countries, it seems like a bit of a letdown, isn't it?
It is, but we still have other components under the Kuala Lumpur Stock Exchange, and hopefully that can help to boost KLCI's reputation soon enough.
So another thing that UOB is anticipating is a better second half performance for ASEAN equity, including Malaysia's, given that the latter is quite leveraged to US economy recovery. Seems like we depend a lot on the US when it comes to our own economy. And if the US does well, Malaysia is expected to follow suit. And this is not healthy considering that the US market is not really doing that well as what we see. The other alternative is to have to have Malaysia to not just rely heavily on the US, but also to expand our market territories and also our outreach. In other words, we shouldn't be the worst performing in ASEAN.
We will pick up.
So the last news of today is actually a news that is rather political and is in Singapore. Have you watched the film To Singapore with Love?
Nope.
I haven't watched it yet, but it's supposed to be screened at the Freedom Film Fest, but it was banned in Singapore, and it is not even allowed to get ratings.
And this documentary was about 9 dissidents living in exile, and according to the Singapore government, its contents could undermine national security, which is why they banned it in the first place.
Who are the dissidents, by the way?
I'm not sure who are the dissidents, but
Is it the member of Communist Party Malaysia?
It's Communist Party of Malaya, and they are also former activists and student leaders who were pretty active in Singapore from the 1960s until the 1980s, and they are currently settled overseas in mostly in Britain and Thailand,
including our very own Chin Peng. The late Chin Peng was also one of those who were expelled from this country, and they were residing in the southern borders of Thailand.
And the film director Tan said she was very disappointed that her film is banned, of course, because the government is taking away the opportunity for Singaporeans to see it and have a conversation about it, because it's always important to know your history, to be able to talk about it. And we were just complaining about Malaysia, how our freedom of expression is being curbed, but it seems like there's a similar case in Singapore, except that it's in the form of banning a film in which they could learn more about their history.
Another film that was banned in 2007 was a film by C on political detainee Said Zahari, who was a journalist. Interestingly, Said Zahari is residing in Malaysia, and it's also interesting to see that how the political situation between both countries in Malaysia and Singapore really affected a lot of people, and hence you have the film To Singapore with Love, especially in the early days during the communist era, where there's a lot of dissidents that were against the government.
I think people are getting really smart these days. just because someone made a documentary about it doesn't mean that they're gonna go and protest the government and overthrow them. It's just a film. They want to learn about their culture. They want to learn about their history.
And do they don't get the point? The more you ban things, the more people will go
want
to the
to
black
see
market
it.
and
Yeah.
see it. If you just keep quiet, people will be like, it's just another movie.
It's another boring documentary. Who cares?
Now everyone is watching it. I bet in Singapore the illegal downloads for that movie will be.
So thank
on
you,
the high up.
Singapore, for promoting this movie, this documentary.
That's all for us today. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter.
Subscribe to our YouTube channel and download the TuneIn app and look for Durian ASEAN.
And next up, we will have a discussion with our favorite Arlene crew on what's in tradition.